Welcome back to The Bark-Covered House by William Knowlin. This is chapter 24. It is titled, Light Begins to Dawn. Father's farm improved with astonishing rapidity and became quite a pleasant place. Some of the stumps rotted out, some we tore out, and some were burned up. And in these ways, many had disappeared, and it began to look like old land. It was rich and productive, and in truth, it looked as level as a house floor. Some seasons it was wet, not being ditched sufficiently to take the water off. Yet Father raised large crops of corn, potatoes, oats, and wheat. Wheat grew very large, but sometimes run too much to straw. Some seasons rust would strike it, and then the grain would shrink, but as the land was getting older and more clay was worked up with the soil, the better wheat it raises. In my opinion, it would be as good a wheat land as oak openings or the prairies of the West for all time to come. Father built him a good frame barn and was getting along well. He bought him a nice pair of black horses, which proved to be very good and serviceable, and it began to seem like home to Mother. She, too, possessed very good conversational powers. Her conversation was always accompanied with a style of frankness and goodness peculiar to herself, which gained many friends who became warmly attached to her, enjoyed her hospitality, witnessed her good cheer, as they gathered around her board and enjoyed in luxuries, which in the years past we had not been able to procure. The learned and illiterate, the rich and the poor shared alike her hospitality. No one ever asked for bread at her door who was refused, if she had it, even to the poor Indian. We had many comers and goers, and I think there were but few in the town of Dearborn who had more friends than Father and Mother. Several years after we planted the first 13 apple trees, Father set out a little orchard of 50 trees west of them. Some of these proved to be very good fruit and supplied us with better apples of our own raising, and in fact some earlier apples, than we had been used to getting from along the Rouge. Then it could be said of us that we sat under our own vine and apple tree and ate the fruit of our hands without anyone to molest us or make us afraid. And it could be said of Father that he made the place where the wilderness stood to blossom as the rose. Everything seemed to work together for our good, and all nature seemed more cheerful. The evening breeze that kissed the rose and made the morning glory that grew by our window unfold its robe so that it would be ready in the morning to display its beauty caused the sunflower, aided by the evening dew, to change its face so that it would be ready to look towards the sun, and bore away on its wings over the fields the fragrance of the rose, the joyful songs of civilization. In the stillness of the beautiful evenings, the air, under the starry canopy of heaven, which made vocal with the songs and tunes of other days, which had been learned and sung oftentimes before in a native land nearly 800 miles away, now the pioneer felt himself safe. He could retire to his bed in his log house and quietly rest in sleep without dreaming any more of the red man's approach or having by his own strong arm to defend his family. Now we need have no fear of Mr. Bruin entering his pig pen and carrying off his pig, as he did ours one night some years before. He tore the hog so badly that it died, although it was rescued by my father and his dog. The bear escaped to the woods. Now how changed the scene with us! We could retire and sleep soundly, feeling as secure as if we had gone to bed down in the state of New York. We could leave the leather string of the door latch hanging out for anyone to enter, as nearly all the early settlers were friends. The axe was now left stuck in the wood block on the wood pile, and the rifle hung in its hooks, not to be disturbed. In other nights, of our first settlement, Father did not feel safe, and the string of the door latch was taken in, and the door was fastened and blockaded on the inside. His axe and his rifle were placed with care back of the curtains at the head of his bed. None of us knew what might happen before the light of another morning, for we were in a wilderness land, neighbors far apart. How different a few years have made it. Now nature seems to smile upon us, and the evening, when it comes in its beauty, seems to offer us quiet and repose, rest and security. Now when nature puts on her habiliments of night, the blue canopy was covered with stars that glistened and shone in their glory as they looked down upon us and seemed to witness our prosperity. How they illuminated our beautiful spring nights. The beautiful feathered songsters that had returned from the south warbled their songs in our ears anew and seemed to exert themselves to make their notes clear and to let us know that they had come. The little gray phoebe birds, the robins, and the bluebirds were the first harbingers of spring. As night put on its shade, their little notes were hushed in the darkness, and then the whippoorwill took up the strain. He would come, circle round and over our house and dooryard, and then light down. He too came to visit us. He had found our place again. In fact, he found us every spring after we settled in Michigan and cut out a little hole in the woods. At first his song seemed to be whip-poor-will, 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 and then by listening it could be made out to say good-will, good-will. In later years, by aid of imagination, his notes were interpreted peace and plenty, peace and plenty. But whatever we might imagine him to say, his song was always the same. He was a welcome visitor and songster, and his appearance in the spring was always hailed with joy. Sometimes I would rise early in the morning and go out the door just at daylight. I could hear the notes of the little songsters just waking, singing their first songs of the morning. I would listen to see if I could hear the gobbling of the wild turkeys. I hardly ever failed to hear them, sometimes in different directions. I frequently could hear 2 or 3 at once. The old gobblers commonly selected the largest trees in the thickest woods with limbs high up for their roosts. And as soon as it came daylight in the east, they would be up strutting and gobbling. They could be heard in a still morning for a mile or 2. The gobbling of the turkey, the drumming of the partridge upon his log, the crowing of our and our neighbors' roosters, and the noise of the woodpeckers pounding the tops of the old trees were the principal sounds I could hear when I set out with my rifle in hand. I made my way through the prickly ash brush, sometimes getting my clothes torn and my hands and face scratched. When going into the dark woods in the early morning, I went for the nearest turkey that I heard, often wading through water knee-deep, the woods being nearly always wet in the spring. If the turkey did not happen to be too far off, I got near it before it was light and got my eye on it before it saw me and flew away. I would crawl up and get behind some tree that came in range between me and it so that it could not see me. I had to be careful not to step on a stick, as the breaking of a stick or any noise that I was liable to make would scare the turkey away. If I had the good luck to get up to that tree without his discovering me, I would sit or stand by it and look with one eye at the old turkey as he gobbled, strutted, spread his wings, and then drew them on the limb where he stood and turned himself around to listen to see if there was anything new for him to gobble at. If he heard the distant woodpecker pounding away with his beak on the old hollow top, he would stretch up his neck and gobble again as cheerfully as before, and then I would put my rifle up aside the tree to see if it was light enough for me to see the sights on it. If it was not, I would have to take it down and wait a few minutes for it to get lighter. I felt very uneasy and impatient while waiting and wanting to take that turkey by the legs and carry him over my shoulder home. When it was light enough so I thought it was dangerous to wait, as the turkey might discover me or fly off his perch, then I would draw up my rifle by the side of that tree and shoot at him. And sometimes the old turkey would retain all his feathers and fly away and leave me to wade back to the house, thinking to myself that I had had a hard job for nothing. The great trouble in shooting wild turkeys on the roost in the spring of the year and in the early morning is not being able to see the sights of the rifle plain enough. Of course, I was sometimes rewarded for my early rising and wet feet by a nice turkey to take home to father and mother for dinner. This style of hunting for the wild turkeys was known by the settlers in an early day. Another way I had of capturing turkeys was by shooting them by the use of a small instrument that I also carried in my vest pocket when in the woods. It was made from the hollow bone of a turkey wing. I called it a turkey call. By holding the end of my hand and sucking it right, it would make a noise or squeak very similar to a turkey's voice. Sometimes, when I heard one gobbling in the woods, I would go as near as I could and not let him see me, hide myself behind an old log or a root where a tree had blown down, take the hollow bone out of my pocket and call. I have seen them come up on a run, sometimes one, and at other times more. While lying in ambush once, I shot two at the same time with one rifle bullet and got them both. I'd often shot at a flock in the woods. They would scatter and fly in all directions, and I would run ahead near where I thought they lighted and call. If a lone turkey heard the shrill note, he would answer and was easily decoyed up to me. And in this way, I was very sure to get him. Father made one of the luckiest shots at wild turkeys of which I ever knew. They had a notion of coming into his buckwheat field and filling their crops with buckwheat, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Father discovered them in the field, and he went away round and approached them from the woods on the back side of the field where they came in. The turkeys discovered him through the brush and the fence and huddled up with their heads together. He said they were just getting ready to fly, and he shot amongst them with a shotgun and killed 4 at once. There are, at the present time, 1875, a scattering wild turkeys in the town of Dearborn, but they've mostly disappeared. Tame turkeys in abundance have long since taken their place. So the farm is really, getting finished here. They're able to farm much easier. He talks of the log house, not the log cabin. So it's not a cabin like this one, but a 2-story affair with hewn logs and a much fancier house. And then he goes on about the nature, and then takes us into hunting of wild turkeys. I've never hunted wild turkeys. I hear that they are very tricky, very wily animals, even though, when I grew up in this area, there were no wild turkeys. So I don't know that wild turkeys were ever common in this area, in the last 150 years that I know of. But now wild turkeys are in this area, and at times we have seen on this property or just north of it, flocks of 20, 30 birds at a time, lots and lots of wild turkeys. It's really kind of amazing to, never have seen one on, in this area before, and then all of a sudden now they're a very common piece of item of game that you would see along the road or wildlife. So really, really enjoy William Knowlin's stories and telling us about his childhood. There's so much to learn and kind of lost. We can almost read into William Knowlin's stories as if he was, our great-great-grandfather or something, especially in this area, So it's great to read this and think back about, maybe, my ancestors or other people's ancestors that were just right here, right here in this area. Thank you so much for your support of us. It means a lot. So thanks again, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.